Hey, today on the Steaming Pile, we're taking a break from our normal format, and I don't have to be factual, because we're talking about Star Wars. I get to ignore the canon, much like Disney does, because we're going to talk about bad ideas for Star Wars spin-offs, and one good one. These are all intentionally bad, except for one. Anyway, let's get to it. First up on our list, an idea featuring everyone's favorite Grand Moff, Tarkin. Maybe the only one you know the name of. But the idea is, look who's Tarkin now. It would basically be a ripoff of Look Who's Talking Now. And if you haven't seen Look Who's Talking Now, I'll give you a few seconds to watch the trailer. Alright, now that you're back, you get the general plot of that movie. So what it would essentially be is we would have Grand Moff Tarkin in utero and shortly after birth, experiencing life. And I think it would be a good idea to go ahead and cast John Travolta as the surrogate father in this movie and use the de-aging technology and have him talk like he used to talk. Oh my god, I'm totally gonna be your dad! Hey, do you want to learn how to form an oppressive government and smack around some aliens? This is gonna be great! Let's do it! Now, I don't know who the mother would be, and hey, maybe we can get an impressionist to do Cushing's voice, since he's dead, or just hire Bruce Willis again. No one cares. Bruce Willis is young Grand Moff Tarkin's inner monologue. Learning the virtues of fascism and just being an all-around dick. Next up, we have a movie that would be suitable for Skidamax or Star Wars After Dark in Sexy Tales from Jabba the Hutt's sail barge. Yes, this would basically be like the Red Shoe Diaries, except for it would feature Jabba the Hutt, everyone's favorite Hutt slug-looking crime boss, and Jabba's minions and guests. Just imagine it, Jabba the Hutt having gross, disgusting sex with all kinds of aliens, like Twi'leks, for example. Now, what that Leku do, girl? Or maybe one of his minions, seeing if a Gamorrean could actually squeal like a pig. Alright, now that you have slug, pig sex, and tentacle-headed alien orgies in your head, let's move on to the next one. Greedo, how did it come to this? We set the stage by going to Mos Eisley Cantina, just before Greedo dies. Yes, sensing his own death, Greedo's life flashes before his eyes. He knows he's going to die. Han Solo is about to kill this motherfucker. So this would be the biography of Greedo. Now, granted, the Legends canon has a lot to say about this, and so does some of the new canon to a lesser degree. But Disney threw a lot of this shit out the window, so who cares? We can talk about Greedo's awkward childhood, how he watched Anakin win the Boonta Classic. We can see Greedo's awkward adolescence and the first time he groped a titty or a tentacle or whatever passes for genitalia in the Star Wars universe. Maybe Greedo lost his virginity to a Bothan. Who knows? The world is our oyster. So we could show Greedo's early criminal career and his ill-fated career as a bounty hunter. And I think the topic of this would basically be, Greedo sucks. Greedo just happens to get the job done on occasion by happenstance. And by stupid luck, somehow garner a small reputation. Right before Han Solo, in this movie at least, shoots first and kills him. And that would be the end of that. Moving slowly on, because we're going to talk about the Sandcrawler. Do you remember the Sandcrawler? The tank-like vehicle that the Jawas piloted to sell droids and equipment to moisture farmers all across Tatooine? Well, that's what this would be about. The movie would basically take place right after C-3PO and R2-D2 were sold to Uncle Owen in Star Wars A New Hope. And it would be the day-to-day operations of the Sandcrawler through the eyes of the Gonk droid. If you don't remember the Gonk droid, basically, he looked like a tilted-over wastebasket with feet that would just say, Gonk. And that's about it. So, we would see the Gonk droid travel through the Sandcrawler. We would see Jawas having business disputes, solving technical problems, fixing droids, showering, and maybe fucking. Who knows? But I like the idea of the Gonk droid watching one of the Jawas shower. And then the Jawa wrapping itself up so you still don't see its face but only the glowing eyes, and it lets out a cheetee. That's just me though. Anyway, the movie would read kind of like a workplace comedy for a little bit until the very last scene, and if you've seen Star Wars A New Hope, you know the fate of the Jawas. When Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi come across the wreckage of the Sandcrawlers because the Stormtroopers, in their quest for C-3PO and R2-D2, have destroyed it. So the very last scene, it would just do a complete and utter 180. It goes from being a weird, stupid comedy to an all-out massacre. It would be like one of those movies where there's suddenly a bombing, and then you hear that high-pitched noise and you don't see anything, and then just stormtroopers blowing Jawas away. And droids, until inevitably the Gonk droid itself is shot and killed, powering off forever, to go to that huge dump in the sky. And on that depressing note, let's move on. Do you remember Salacious Crumb? Probably not. He was the Kowokian lizard monkey that Jabba had in his palace in Return of the Jedi. You know that really annoying, chattering, laughing Muppet that sat by Jabba, who was himself a larger and more endearing Muppet? Well, this story would be about him. Now, there's several routes we could go with this. Maybe like a Beethoven sort of comedy, where Jabba wants a pet, and wanting a pet, his minions go out to find him one. They decide on Salacious Crumb. They bring him home, Jabba instantly falls in love with him, but the rest of the palace hates him. Maybe he's crapping in Bib Fortuna's food, maybe he's jerking off in the Rancor pit, maybe he's punching the Rancor in the balls, who knows? Maybe he's harassing the Twi'lek dancing girls, just causing a bad time for everyone. But this is why Jabba loves him. So it would be a classic sort of Beethoven meets Star Wars story. But we could also go another way. Do you all remember Benji the Hunted? Probably not, because it was a horrible movie. But in that movie, a little cute dog runs away from home, ends up in the forest, and for some reason is shot at by poachers or hunters. I don't know why. But this could be about the same. Maybe one day, Salacious Crumb escapes Jabba's palace and braves the deserts of Tatooine. And this could be right before A New Hope as well. So on Salacious's day out, we see him traverse the desert and get into all kind of hijinks. Maybe he harasses the Sarlacc. Maybe the Tusken Raiders try to hunt him and kidnap him. Maybe they do catch him. Maybe they're gonna cook and eat him and he has to escape a Tusken Raider camp. Maybe he runs afoul of the Jawas. But I think it could all come to a head, and it'd be a nice little cameo here, where he decides to turn tail and run back to Jabba's palace after encountering some womp rats that Luke Skywalker is bullseyeing in his T-16. And then after being confused for a womp rat, Luke heads after Salacious Crumb, blasting all the way. Salacious Crumb having to dodge laser blasts, ducking behind rocks into little hidey holes until he finally makes it back to Jabba's palace, where he never realized he had it so good. Next up, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, this one ain't the good one. Because there's no way to hide it. Not that the last ones were great either. But this is basically Star Wars meets C-SPAN. Yes, that's right. We're going to do a story about Chancellor Valorum. But maybe you don't remember who Chancellor Valorum is. He was the guy in Episode 1 who was deposed by Senator Palpatine. The vote of no confidence was had, and then Palpatine was installed as head of the Senate. This would be before that, and it would be the day-to-day. We would basically just see a litany of legislation, trade disputes, and just all around all the stuff that makes politics in real life boring, but with aliens. I'm about to fall asleep just thinking about it. Alright, next up we have a biopic, a music biopic. Those always sell. I bet Hollywood would love to do this turd. It would be the story of the Max Rebo Band. You remember the band that played in Jabba's palace with the little blue guy? That's Max Rebo. So, before I get into this, the style of music that Max Rebo plays, and I shit you not, is called Jizz Wailing. The players in a Jizz Wailing band are Jizz Wailers. The genre of music itself is referred to as jizz. I'm not making this up. So anyway, we would essentially follow Max Rebo, the little happy blue guy, on the Red Ball Jet organ, and Droopy McCool, the Kentonac flautist, and Cy Snoodles, the singer. Now this would be your typical musical biopic story. They meet, they form a band, they take off, they're huge for a while, there's conflict. Or you could do it behind the music style, it doesn't matter. Cut with interviews, it would be fraught with addiction, and then maybe the band breaks up, comes back with a glorious return. But I like the idea of showing them have a bunch of problems during the movie. Whether that be through interviews or just narrative. Max Rebo could develop a drug problem. Spice and death sticks, especially glitter stem spice. Maybe we see Max Rebo have to trade sexual favors to Hutts just to get his glitter stem fix. Oh man, I can't tell you how much Hutt dick I had to suck just to get my glitter. And then it gets so bad that the only way he can get high, because the glitter stem isn't doing it for him anymore, is he has to huff Rancor piss, because that's the only way he can get off anymore. Cy Snoodles, like a typical singer, would feel like she was too big for the band, start a solo career that tanks. And Droopy McCool would become addicted to sex. And Droopy McCool would realize he had a sex problem after he woke up from a steamy orgy featuring a bantha, a wampa, and a half-eaten dewback, and not remember how he got there. And all of this would culminate 10 years after Return of the Jedi, when the Max Rebo Band makes their triumphant return to the stage. Or actually, scratch that. This would all culminate when Max Rebo finally makes their triumphant return to the stage. But this would be in The Force Awakens. And it would be one of those planets that was blown up by the Starkiller base. As they're playing their final note to an audience that's come all this way to see them on one of these ill-fated planets, they think, man, it can't get better than this. Planet explodes. Alright, next we have C-3PO's dinner party. Yeah, that's right, C-3PO is an etiquette droid, human-cyborg relations. But we never really get to see him do his job much. Now, granted, he's a good interpreter, and he, is fairly useful throughout the Star Wars movies, but we never get to see him be the poncy dandy that he actually is. So this would basically be Downton Abbey meets Star Wars. The early days of the New Republic, post-Return of the Jedi. When they're just getting the Galactic Senate back together, C-3PO is tasked with setting up an elegant dinner for all of the representatives. This would be fraught with all of the crap that people like in Downton Abbey. The servers not getting along with the well-to-do politicians. Slight political misunderstandings. You can't seat the Wookiees with the Trandoshans. They hate each other. BS like that. But anyway, moving on. Next we have the Death Star Sanitation Unit. And this would essentially be a workplace comedy about the custodial staff on the Death Star and how they manage waste. If you're on a battle station the size of a moon, there's a lot of poop to deal with. And a lot of trash. And a lot of prisoners. So essentially, this would basically just be the trash compactor scene from A New Hope for an hour and a half. And next up, do you remember the lovable little Ewoks from Return of the Jedi? Well, after Return of the Jedi, they had to garner a reputation for helping the rebellion defeat the Empire. And with that reputation would come a new set of problems. The Ewoks are a very primitive people. What happens after the rebellion leaves? Well, obviously, like many natives, they're going to be exploited. And in this movie, they're going to be exploited sexually. That's right, Wicket, if you remember him, the main Ewok from the movies, the lovable little dude with the brown rags all over him, he gets captured with about a dozen or so other Ewoks, and he's forced into either sex slavery or to make holovid porn. And Wicket, being exploited with a good portion of the rest of his tribe, has to figure out how to either escape or unionize. So this would basically be a sexual thriller featuring everyone's favorite cute Star Wars character, Wicket. I like to call it Sticky Wicket. Alright, now we have another comedy that's a complete ripoff of Barbershop called Chewie's Barbershop. Now there's two ways to go with this movie. One, we could have it take place on Kashyyyk, which is the homeworld of the Wookiees. And if we did that, the staff would be peopled by nothing but Wookiees. But they would, as they're covered in hair, they would have great renown across the galaxy as hairstylists. And even further, before I get to the way I would handle this the next part, we'd have to decide, would we subtitle this? We might subtitle the comedy, with Chewie obviously being the Ice Cube character. So essentially, this would just be a movie of hairy people growling at each other. With subtitles, or maybe we go old school. Back in the day, a long time ago, they used to have a live orchestra to play the music for silent films. So you hire local actors for this movie, and instead of actually having subtitles, they have to read the lines back and forth to each other in overblown, scene-chewing, ham-fisted acting parlance. Now, if we didn't go this way, we could set the shop on Coruscant, still make Chewie the Ice Cube character, but people the rest of the barbershop with other aliens. A Rhodian, a human, a Twi'lek, a Gamorrean, who knows, who cares. But essentially it's the same thing, just not hairy people screaming at each other, which I'd prefer. Lastly, let's discuss a Star Wars horror film that I would really like to see. If you've seen Empire Strikes Back, my personal favorite Star Wars movie, you remember the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader. I enjoyed this duel for many reasons. Granted, it's not as up to snuff in the choreography department as the later films would be, or the prequel films would be, but it's excellent, and it shows just how scary Vader is. If you remember watching that for the first time as a small child, before you know what's going to happen, it's very scary. Vader slinks into the shadows at times. You never know when he's going to come out. It makes you feel like a slasher movie character is stalking Luke. And then occasionally you can just hear the breathing, which just adds to the horror. So, why not make a whole movie like that? And what I mean by that is, you would set this movie in between Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars A New Hope. Some Jedi, having escaped Order 66, have fled to other planets in small groups or singularly, and they are in hiding. Now, there's not many of them left. And Vader, as we all know, hunted down most of these Jedi before the events of Star Wars A New Hope and killed them. So I like the idea of opening up a movie where you hear nothing but screams and breathing and the hum of a lightsaber. Suddenly a woman sits bolt upright. She's dreaming about the encampment she lived in of Jedi that Vader had found and slaughtered. Now this would be about 5 or 10 years previous, and she would have been a Padawan at the time, and the only one to survive that massacre and find this new encampment and slowly become the leader of that encampment. At this point, she is a Jedi Knight. She has a few Padawans, and she is trying to slowly rebuild the Jedi Order. Her master, having saved her from Vader, sacrificing himself so she could get away, which would be revealed later through the story as she told the story of the massacre to the Padawans. But all would not be well, as Vader would eventually find this encampment. The setting would be kind of like the forest moon of Endor, so you could have that nice camp movie horror film feel. Just imagine it. Vader stalking the woods, never saying a word, just a cold, refined blade of hate. Maybe one of the death scenes you have one of the young Jedi breathing behind a tree just really heavily and just worried, scared for his life, and then all of a sudden you just see a lightsaber shoot up through his gut and split him and the tree in half. There are a ton of potential death scenes that would be great for this movie featuring Vader. Vader could be a slasher character on the level of Michael Myers, Jason, Leatherface, and in a Star Wars film, no less. And eventually you would come to the last scene where he would perhaps slay, or maybe she would live to fight another day, the leader of the encampment. And this could even lead to sequels. Again, this takes place sometime during the 20-year period between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Maybe a sequel could be the Rebellion finding out where Vader's base is, Castle Vader, which we have seen in Rogue One. Maybe they find the location to Castle Vader and they think they're going to assassinate Vader. So basically, the sequel to that would be a haunted house sort of movie featuring Darth Vader murdering the Rebellion. But that's all for this week's video. I'm Jake. This was the Steaming Pile. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And we'll see you next time. You can throw that brutal ass fart in there too for the end. And keep that fart. Alright, I'm done.